My name is Olivia Carter, 28 years old, and the night I learned just how cruel betrayal could feel, the world narrowed down to the glow of my phone screen and the sharp sting of humiliation. I had just come home from work, dropped my second-hand purse on the kitchen counter, and opened a can of soup because payday was still 3 days away. My small apartment smelled faintly of dust and lavender candle smoke, the kind I burned to mask the damp plaster scent that never went away. That's when the buzz rattled across the countertop. His name flashed up, Aaron, my ex-husband. Against my better judgment, I swiped open. The words punched through me like a slap. "You'll die," pour all caps, cold, final. I gasped out loud, the spoon in my hand clattering onto the tile. Before I could even process it, another message arrived, and my throat closed up. A photo. Aaron in a crisp suit, his arm around Claudia, my sister, my parents' golden girl. They were in a velvet-draped restaurant I couldn't afford to even park. Near champagne glasses high, Claudia leaning into him with her smug, perfect smile. Her hand rested on his chest like she owned him, like she owned everything. The shame was so sharp, I doubled over, clutching the counter for balance. Another ping. Even your own family knows you're worthless. Claudia and I are real. You just a pathetic teacher grading papers no one cares about. The words blurred in my vision, but the sound of their imagined laughter filled my ears, cruel and cutting. My hands trembled so hard I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a crack, the screen lighting up again with his face. I kicked the phone across the linoleum, rage tearing through the numbness. My elbow caught the soup can, and it crashed into the sink, splattering broth against the wall. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, broken only by my ragged breathing, and the rush of blood in my ears. For a split second, I saw myself from above. Alone in this shoebox apartment, while they toasted in gold light, memories came at me in jagged shards. Claudia, at 16, handed the keys to a brand new car, while I stood off to the side, clutching my bus pass. My college graduation, where my parents whispered about leaving early some to catch her sorority gala. Even my wedding, my own wedding, where my mother sat at Claudia's table instead of mine. And now Aaron's slipping effortlessly from being my husband to being her trophy. Betrayal layered on betrayal until it crushed me flat. "You'll die poor." The words branded themselves in my chest. I grabbed the nearest thing, a chipped coffee mug, and hurled it at the wall. It shattered ceramic, exploding into sharp pieces that littered the floor like my dignity. My shoulders shook, but tears wouldn't come anymore. Only fury. I thought about replying, typing something savage, but what was the point? He'd laugh. Claudia would screenshot it for the family group chat, proof of my melodrama. I bit down so hard on my lip I tasted blood and whispered into the empty room. "This isn't the end." The words were shaky, but they lit a spark. I didn't sleep. I lay on my couch, staring at the dark ceiling, hearing phantom echoes of Claudia's laugh, Aaron's taunting voice. By morning, my eyes burned, but I dragged myself up, forced myself into a cardigan and sensible flats, and went to teach. Children's voices filled the classroom, sweet and loud. A lifeline to sanity. But at lunch, alone in the staff lounge, I unwrapped a peanut butter sandwich I had made with the last heel of bread. Across town, no doubt, Aaron and Claudia were eating steak and lobster, probably mocking me between bites. The bitterness tightened my chest until I could barely chew. My phone buzzed again. My stomach lurched, expecting more poison from Aaron. But the caller ID froze me. It wasn't him. It wasn't Claudia. It was my bank. Confusion swept over me. Why would the bank call? I answered with a shaky, "Hello." The voice on the other end was professional, almost too calm for the chaos spinning in me. "Miss Carter, this is the manager of First National. I wanted to congratulate you. You've been added to our VIP client list. I'd like you to come in this afternoon to finalize details." For a second, I thought it was a scam. I laughed bitterly under my breath. "You must have the wrong Carter," I muttered, but he continued smoothly. "No, Miss Olivia Carter. There has been a trust fund activated under your name. The transfer is substantial. You are now one of our priority clients." The sandwich slid from my fingers, landing in my lap. I couldn't breathe. Just hours after my ex told me I would die. Poor bank manager was calmly calling me a VIP. The irony was so sharp it made me dizzy. My pulse thundered in my ears. I clutched the phone tighter. "I don't understand," I whispered. The manager chuckled softly. "We'll explain when you arrive, Miss Carter. Just know it's good news." Good news. My whole life had been a chorus of Claudia's victories and my defeats. And now, out of nowhere, a new note had been struck. I hung up staring at my reflection in the lounge's vending machine. Glass red eyes, trembling hands, a woman who looked both broken and suddenly terrifyingly on the edge of something vast. "You'll die," poor Aaron had promised. But with the words VIP client still echoing in my ear, I realized maybe, just maybe, his prophecy wasn't mine to keep. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a war neither he nor Claudia could see coming. The call from the bank should have lifted me, but instead it unsettled me like a stone dropped into still water. Walking back to my classroom, I could barely hold the marker steady as I wrote spelling words on the board. The children noticed the tremor in my hand, their small voices filling the room with questions. But I forced a smile and carried on. Inside, though, the ghosts of the past clawed up from the depths, each one whispering the same poison Aaron had texted the night before. "You'll die poor. You've always been poor. You've always been less." I remembered being 12, standing in the living room, as Claudia twirled in a sequined dress my parents had bought her for homecoming. They'd clapped and told her she looked like a princess. I had asked shyly if we could afford a dress for me too, and my father had barked, "Do you think money grows on trees? Wear what you have." I had gone to the dance in an old skirt and sweater ignored in the corner while Claudia held court. That humiliation had planted roots deep in me, and they had never stopped growing. Then college. I had earned a full academic scholarship, something I was proud of, but it didn't mean much at home. When the acceptance letter came, my mother had glanced at it once before tossing it aside, saying, "Well, Claudia's sorority has a formal this weekend. She'll need a new gown." They'd drained their savings for her gowns, her trips, her cars, while I took night shifts at the library to buy textbooks. I thought then that independence would shield me, that working for my place in the world would make me immune to their favoritism. But independence doesn't erase hunger when you come home to ramen and overdue bills. while your sister posts selfies from Greek island vacations. And then came Aaron. At first, he was the one person who seemed to see me. He said he admired my drive, my resilience. But slowly, those compliments turned into barbs wrapped in jokes. "You work so hard, Olivia," he'd say at dinner. "Too bad it doesn't pay much." My parents laughed with him, and Claudia would sip her wine, smirking. I ignored it, excused it as stress. But the night of my wedding, when I caught my mother sitting at Claudia's table instead of mine, I felt the knife slide in. When Aaron leaned over during our first dance and whispered, "Even tonight she outshines you," I felt the twist. Still, I had smiled for the cameras. So now, reading his midnight text, those memories weren't just old wounds. They were open, bleeding, fresh. The worst part wasn't that Aaron had chosen Claudia. It was that my family would welcome him with open arms. They would see no betrayal, no shame. To them, it would be natural. Claudia deserves the best. Olivia can fend for herself. I drove home from school that day with the bank manager's voice echoing in my ears. But all I could think about was how quickly my family would try to steal whatever miracle had landed in my lap. I imagined Claudia's shrill voice, claiming it was rightfully hers, my mother wringing her hands and saying, "Don't be selfish, Olivia. You know your sister needs it more." I imagined Aaron smug and dangerous, insisting that because he'd once been my husband, he had a claim. Gaslighting had been the soundtrack of my life. "You're dramatic, Olivia. You're ungrateful. You're jealous," over and over until I started believing it myself. Aaron's text wasn't just an insult. It was the culmination of every sneer, every dismissal, every act of erasure I had endured from the people who were supposed to love me. By the time I parked in front of my apartment that evening, I was shaking. The box of papers from my school bag slid onto the passenger seat, scattering across the floor, and I just sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The words throbbed in my skull, relentless. "You'll die poor." My family had made sure of it. And if Aaron and Claudia had their way, they would make sure I stayed crushed under that prophecy forever. But the call from the bank lingered like a flicker of light in the cracks. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure if it would save me or destroy me. The following afternoon, I stood in the polished marble lobby of First National Bank, my palms damp against the strap of my bag. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and wealth, the kind of sterile luxury I had never belonged in. A receptionist in a navy suit smiled too brightly and said, "Miss Carter, right this way. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you." My throat tightened at the sound of my name paired with respect, as if she believed I belonged here. Mr. Whitmore, the bank manager, was an older man with silver hair and a practiced, steady gaze. He rose from behind a desk the size of my entire kitchen table, extended a hand, and said, "Miss Carter, thank you for coming on such short notice." His grip was firm, his smile courteous but not condescending. Still, my stomach churned. I half expected him to tell me it was all a mistake, that the call had been meant for Claudia. He gestured for me to sit. I perched on the leather chair like it might reject me. He slid a folder across the desk. "This is regarding the Carter Family Trust. I understand this may come as a surprise." The words hardly registered. I blinked at the bold lettering on the document, "Beneficiary Olivia Carter." I stammered, "There must be some mistake. My sister." My voice cracked. Claudia, she's the one they've always. He lifted a hand, calm, deliberate. No mistake. The trust was established years ago by your grandfather, Thomas Carter. It was designed to activate upon certain conditions, one of which was triggered this month. You are the sole heir of this portion. My chest went hollow, air rushing out. So, heir, he nodded. The account currently holds $12 million in assets diversified between cash and equities. Additional properties are tied to the trust, but the key point is this. Your grandfather designated you and you alone as the beneficiary. The room blurred. I gripped the edge of the chair so I wouldn't fall. 12 million. I had been counting coins for bus fare last week. Clipping coupons at midnight, and here he was speaking numbers that didn't sound real. I shook my head. Why me? It spilled out before I could stop it. He studied me, then said gently, "Perhaps your grandfather saw something others didn't. His journals are in the safety deposit box connected to this trust. He left instructions for you to review them." For a heartbeat, the world froze. Journals. My grandfather's handwriting. The man who used to sit me on his knee and teach me piano while Claudia rolled her eyes. He had always spoken to me like I mattered, even when no one else did. The bank manager slid a brass key toward me. Its weight pressed into my palm as if it carried decades of unspoken truths. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Carter. The box is yours." I left the bank in a daze, the city around me suddenly strange. People bustled on the sidewalks, cars honked, life moved as always, but I felt as though I was walking inside a glass bubble. Every sound muted, every color sharpened. The insult Aaron had hurled at me, "You'll die poor," rang in my ears, colliding with the surreal new reality of VIP client heir, $12 million. On the steps outside, I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Aaron's name. I could send him a screenshot of the trust documents, wipe that smug smirk off his face. I could text Claudia and watch her choke on her own arrogance. But I stopped. No, this wasn't about proving them wrong. Not yet. This was about understanding why my grandfather had chosen me. The overlooked granddaughter, the failure teacher. The brass key dug into my hand as I clenched it, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of power, fragile but undeniable. They had branded me worthless all my life, but hidden in the shadows my grandfather had left me. Not just wealth, but a message, a test. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous than money. I drove home from the bank with the brass key burning hot in my palm, as though it carried fire from another world. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, the city's noise humming through the thin wall of my apartment, and I let myself remember the man who had given me that key long before I ever knew it existed, my grandfather Thomas Carter. He wasn't like the rest of the family. While my parents praised Claudia for every shallow accomplishment, Grandfather Thomas saw something different in me. I was 6 the first time he placed my small hands on the cool ivory keys of his piano. "Music," he whispered, "is where truth hides." I had giggled clumsy and off-key, but he never scolded. He guided, patient, gentle. When Claudia wandered into the room, she complained it was boring, that the notes didn't sound like anything fun. He had simply smiled, kissed the top of my head, and told her to run along. Years later, when middle school bullies made me cry for wearing second-hand clothes, it was him who found me in the backyard, scribbling in a notebook. He sat beside me, handed me a sharpened pencil, and said, "They'll never understand, Olivia, but you write it down. Keep the truth. One day it will matter." His blue eyes were sharp even then, though his hair had already gone silver. He had a way of making me feel like my existence meant something, even as my parents treated me like an afterthought. He'd clap at my report cards, slip me candy bars when I couldn't afford lunch, and always ask me what I thought about the world. Nobody else cared what I thought. The last time I saw him alive, I was 22. Claudia had just announced her engagement at a lavish dinner, my parents fawning over her fiancé's trust fund. I had tried to celebrate, but I remember slipping out to the porch for air. My grandfather found me there hunched against the cold night and pressed an envelope into my hand. "Keep this safe," he murmured. "Don't open it until you're ready." His voice trembled not from age but from urgency. I'd tucked the envelope into my journal, never daring to open it. Months later, he was gone. The family mourned him with champagne toasts. Claudia delivered a self-congratulatory eulogy, and I stood silent, clutching my unopened envelope like it was a lifeline. Now, years later, with the brass key heavy in my hand, I understood. He had chosen me all along. Me, not Claudia. Me, the forgotten granddaughter, the one who listened when he played old war songs on the piano, the one who didn't roll her eyes at his stories about the Battle of the Bulge, the one who actually cared. I pulled the envelope from a box under my bed that night. My hands shook as I slid out a folded sheet of paper. His handwriting sprawled across the page, uneven but deliberate. "Olivia, if you are reading this, then it means you've been given what I left behind. Not for wealth alone, for truth. This family has rotted from the inside, greed eating it alive. I saw it in your parents. I see it most clearly in Claudia. But you carry something else. You carry integrity. Protect it. The journals will tell you the rest. Trust only those who earn it." My chest tightened. He had seen it too, the rot, the favoritism, the poison that had been poured into my life since I was a child. He hadn't been blind. He had been waiting. Tears blurred my vision, but I let them fall. For once, they weren't tears of helplessness. They were tears of recognition. My grandfather had believed in me when no one else did. And now, through his legacy, he was speaking to me again from beyond the grave. I thought of Claudia's sneer, Aaron's taunting text, "You'll die poor." The words felt brittle now, like cheap glass ready to shatter under my grandfather's steel. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it to my lips, and whispered, "I won't let you down." The next morning, I scheduled a visit to the bank's vault. The key felt less like a weight now and more like a weapon. I didn't know what his journals contained, but I knew they weren't just about money. My grandfather was a soldier, a strategist, a man who had lived through wars both on the battlefield and inside his own family. Whatever secrets he had written down, they weren't just for nostalgia. They were instructions, and I was ready to listen. As I slid the key into my purse, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in my own life. I felt chosen, empowered, but under that calm pulsed something sharper fear. because if my grandfather had hidden this from the rest of the family, if he had bypassed Claudia and my parents to leave everything to me, then he must have known one thing with absolute certainty. They would try to take it from me, and they would stop at nothing. The bank vault was colder than I expected. The hum of the climate control system echoing like a whisper through the metal chamber. Mr. Whitmore led me to a small booth where he placed a long, heavy safety deposit box on the table. The brass key slid into the lock with a satisfying click. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled neatly like a puzzle waiting to be solved, were several leather-bound journals, a sealed envelope, and a stack of official-looking documents tied with string. My breath caught as I pulled out the journals first. The covers were worn, the edges frayed, and the smell of old paper wafted up a scent that instantly dragged me back to my grandfather's study, the smell of ink and dust that clung to his tweed jackets. I opened one. His handwriting filled the pages, in tight lines, notations in the margins, maps sketched across entire spreads. Some entries described mundane days gardening, playing the piano, his reflections on books. But others made my stomach twist. They detailed shady land deals, money shuffled quietly through shell companies, and names, my parents' names appearing on contracts that reeked of fraud. Flipping through, I froze at one entry, written in bold, jagged script. Claudia cannot be trusted. She has learned her mother's greed, her father's hunger for appearances. They will destroy everything for status. Olivia must never be pushed aside. She is the only one who asks about truth. My throat tightened. I traced the ink with my fingertip, the words proof that he had seen the same corruption I had lived under. The sealed envelope bore my name. Hands trembling, I tore it open. Inside was a letter, direct and unflinching. Olivia, if they are reading this, it is too late. But if you are, then the power is yours. Within these documents lies not just wealth, but evidence. Your parents and Claudia have committed crimes, fraudulent land transfers, illegal tax shelters. They will not forgive you for holding this proof. They will come for you, protect yourself, and if necessary, bring this to the law. Trust Denise Miller. She is one of the few who can help you. I sat frozen, the letter slipping from my fingers. Denise Miller, I knew that name. She was a lawyer who had once defended a friend of mine in a brutal custody battle and won. My grandfather had left me not just wealth but a path, a network, a way forward. I sifted through the string-bound stack, deeds for properties I never knew existed, bank account numbers in Switzerland, photographs of my father shaking hands with men whose names I recognized from scandal-ridden headlines, and receipts, dozens of them, for money siphoned from charity funds my mother had once boasted about running in Claudia's honor. Each piece of paper was a knife, each signature a nail in the coffin of their spotless facade. At the bottom of the box was something unexpected, a sheet of music. Handwritten notes sprawled across the staff lines, a melody I recognized instantly. It was the song my grandfather had taught me on the piano, the lullaby I had played clumsily as a child. Beneath the notes in faint pencil was a string of numbers, a code. My pulse quickened. He had hidden information inside the melody, trusting only I would see it. Claudia had always called that tune pointless. she would never have noticed the numbers woven beneath. For nearly an hour, I sat in that vault, flipping pages, absorbing the enormity of what my grandfather had entrusted me with. This wasn't just inheritance, it was a reckoning, a map to dismantle the empire of lies my family had built on Claudia's back. By the time I packed everything back into the box, my head throbbed. Mr. Whitmore returned, eyebrows raised politely, as he saw the pallor in my face. "Is everything in order, Miss Carter?" I nodded numbly, clutching the journals to my chest. "Yes, everything's in order." But as I walked out into the sunlight, the brightness nearly blinding, I knew that nothing was in order at all. I was holding dynamite disguised as ink and paper. My family would not just be furious, they would be desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. Back in my apartment that night, I spread the journals across the floor, papers fluttering in the breeze from the cracked window. My heart pounded as I reread the warning, "They will come for you." A knock at the door made me jump so violently the papers scattered. I crept forward, peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Still, the dread remained curling in my gut like smoke. They didn't know yet, but they would. And when they did, Claudia and Aaron would come like vultures. I sat in the dim light, staring at the coded sheet music, at my grandfather's spidery handwriting, at the evidence of decades of rot. The anger that had festered in me for years rose sharp and steady, no longer wild but focused. They had spent my whole life telling me I was nothing, but I was holding everything that could destroy them. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what that meant. I was ready. It didn't take long. 2 days after my visit to the bank, Claudia called me. I was grading spelling tests at my kitchen table when her name lit up my phone. My hand hesitated, but I answered. Her voice was honey dipped in venom. "Olivia, I hear you've been busy." I froze. "What do you mean?" She laughed, a brittle sound I knew too well. "Don't play dumb. Word gets around fast. The bank doesn't keep secrets as well as you think. You're not equipped to handle that kind of money. It belongs to the family." My pulse hammered. Grandfather left it to me. Silence, then a hiss. He was senile. Everyone knows I was his favorite. "You're just a placeholder until we clean this up." Before I could respond, the line went dead. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. Less than an hour later, Aaron's name appeared on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but his persistence was relentless. Call after call until I picked up. His voice was lower, harsher than Claudia's, carrying an edge that made the hair on my arms rise. "Liv," he drawled, using the nickname that once made me soft. Now it curdled in my gut. "Don't make this ugly. Share the money. Claudia and I will take care of it. Make sure you don't screw up. Be smart." "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice shaking. He laughed coldly. "You owe me everything. I built you up, remember? Without me, you're just a teacher drowning in bills. You think you can play in the big leagues? You'll choke. Better to let us handle it, unless you want people to find out things that might ruin you." I slammed the phone down, my chest-tight air scraping through my lungs. Threats. He was threatening me now. That night, leaving the grocery store with a paper bag of Basics milk bread eggs, I felt eyes on me. My skin prickled. In the parking lot, as I fumbled for my keys, a hand clamped on my shoulder. I spun, heart racing. Aaron stood there, his cologne too familiar, his grin too wide. "Relax," he said, voice slick. "We're just talking. I tried to step back, but he blocked me, his body towering over mine. "Give us the documents, Olivia. Don't drag this out." "I don't have them with me." My voice cracked. His smile vanished. In an instant, he shoved me hard against the car. The bag burst, eggs cracking on the pavement, milk leaking into the asphalt. My shoulder screamed with pain where metal met bone. His face hovered inches from mine, eyes burning with fury. "You're not strong enough for this fight. Hand it over, or you'll regret it." Then he stepped back just as quickly and walked away into the shadows as if nothing had happened. My knees buckled, and I slid down the side of the car, tears spilling, chest heaving. Around me, the parking lot buzzed with indifferent neon light, the world oblivious. By the time I drove home, my hands shook so violently I could barely hold the wheel. I locked every window, every door, then sat on the floor with my grandfather's journals spread around me. Claudia's call, Aaron's threat, the assault. It was happening exactly as grandfather had predicted. I picked up the letter again, reading his words. "Trust Denise Miller. She will help you." I wiped the tears from my cheeks, forcing my breath to steady. My grandfather had known this storm would come. He had given me allies before I even knew I would need them. Aaron thought his shove could break me, that Claudia's venom could weaken me, but instead it lit a fire. They wanted me afraid, but fear, I realized, could be sharpened into resolve. And if they wanted war, I would give them one. The next morning, bruises bloomed purple and blue across my shoulder where Aaron had slammed me into the car. Every time I moved, pain shot down my arm, but I refused to let it slow me. I sat at my kitchen table, my grandfather's journals spread out in a chaotic sprawl, the brass key lying in the center like a compass pointing me forward. I knew I couldn't do this alone anymore. His letter had told me who to trust. So I picked up my phone, scrolled past Aaron's threats, Claudia's smug selfies, and dialed the number I found on an old card still tucked in my wallet. Denise Miller, attorney at law, came a steady female voice. Just hearing her tone made something inside me loosen. I introduced myself, voice shaking, then said, "My grandfather told me to trust you. He left me documents, evidence. I think my family has been committing fraud for years." There was a pause, then Denise said calmly, "Come to my office. Bring everything. And Olivia, don't tell anyone you're meeting me." Her office was a world away from my cramped apartment, all polished wood and bookshelves lined with heavy legal tomes. Denise herself was sharp-eyed, her suit impeccable, her presence commanding without being cold. She let me spread the journals, letters, and documents across her desk. For nearly an hour she combed through them, her pen tapping occasionally against her notepad. Finally she leaned back, eyes meeting mine. "This isn't just inheritance, Olivia. This is a case. Your parents, your sister, your ex, they've been involved in illegal land deals, tax fraud, money laundering. If this goes to court, it won't just ruin reputations. It could put them behind bars." My stomach flipped. Behind bars. The words felt surreal, but also righteous. I thought of Claudia sneering, of Aaron shoving me into the car, of my mother's dismissive sighs. For once, accountability wasn't just a dream. Denise's voice softened. "But here's the thing. You have a choice. You can walk away with the inheritance, keep quiet, and live comfortably. No one would blame you. Or," she gestured at the pile of evidence, "you can use this, You can expose them. It will be dangerous. They'll fight dirty. They already have. But if you're ready, we can dismantle everything they built on lies. I sat there, the air thick, my heart pounding. I imagined taking the money, disappearing to a quiet town, finally free of them. No more insults, no more battles. But then I saw my grandfather's handwriting in my mind. Olivia must never be pushed aside. She is the only one who asks about truth. Truth. That word had been denied to me my whole life. They had buried me under Claudia's shine, under Aaron's cruelty, under gaslighting and lies. If I stayed silent now, I would prove them right. I would be the weak one, the invisible one. I met Denise's gaze. We fight. For the first time, her lips curved into a smile. Good. Then here's what we'll do. We'll build a case so solid they can't wriggle free. Evidence never blinks, Olivia, and you've got plenty of it. Her words echoed through me, steady and fierce. Evidence never blinks. My grandfather had trusted me with his legacy. Denise was offering me a way to honor it. And deep inside, beneath the bruises and the fear, a fire caught hold. I was done being invisible. I was done being told I would die, poor, worthless, forgotten. They thought they had cornered me. They had no idea I had just chosen to become their reckoning. The following weeks blurred into a storm of late nights, endless paperwork, and strategy sessions in Denise Miller's office. She was relentless, and for the first time in my life, someone was relentless for me. She had a team that combed through every deed, every signature, every coded entry in my grandfather's journals. The sheet music, once just a lullaby between us, revealed bank account numbers when translated into ciphers. The accounts led to shell companies tied directly to my parents, and worse, to Claudia herself. While Denise worked the legal angles, my best friend Leah, a journalist I had met in college, stepped in. She had always said she'd break a big story someday. Now she had one in her hands. She recorded my trembling voice as I described Aaron's threats and Claudia's venom. She photographed the bruises on my shoulder. She cataloged the documents, snapping picture after picture under harsh white light. Evidence never blinks, she repeated Denise's words with a fierce gleam in her eyes. The first article Leah published sent shockwaves through the city. The headline screamed across the local paper, "Carter Family Fraud Whistleblower Exposes Generational Scheme." Names were printed in black and white, my parents, Claudia, Aaron. My phone erupted with calls, texts, threats, and pleading messages. My mother left me a voicemail, her voice cracking with feigned fragility. "Olivia, sweetheart, you don't understand what you're doing. Claudia can't survive this kind of stress. She's fragile. Don't make this worse." The same tired refrain, the same manipulation. I deleted it without finishing. Claudia herself showed up outside my apartment. One evening, screaming through the door, "You think you're better than me now? You think a pile of journals makes you someone? You're trash, Olivia. You'll always be trash." I didn't answer. I recorded every word, sent the audio straight to Denise. Aaron was bolder. He cornered me in the school parking lot one afternoon, fury carved into every line of his face. "You've ruined us," he snarled, gripping the edge of my car door so hard his knuckles went white. "You think a teacher can fight me? Fight us. You're nothing without me." His spit flecked my face as he leaned in, his voice a whisper of rage. "If you don't drop this, you won't make it out alive. I met his eyes, fear clawing at my insides, but I forced my voice steady. You already lost Aaron. The law is watching you now. For a flicker of a second, I saw doubt in his gaze, before he slammed the door and stormed off. Within days, subpoenas were issued. FBI agents moved in, seizing records, freezing accounts. News vans parked outside my parents' manicured lawn cameras flashing as my mother pulled curtains shut. Leah's articles multiplied, each one sharper than the last, weaving my grandfather's meticulous notes into a damning narrative. Denise sat across from me in court prep, her voice calm but firm. They will smear you. They will call you dramatic, unstable, ungrateful. They'll say you fabricated everything. Do not waver. We have the documents. We have the coded music. We have the recordings. Evidence never blinks, Olivia. Her words steadied me. For years I had been gaslit into doubting my own memory, my own worth. Now, for the first time, I had proof that could not be erased by Claudia's smirk or Aaron's sneer. The morning of the first court hearing, I walked up the courthouse steps, flanked by Denise and Leah. The sun glared hot on the concrete cameras clicking all around me. Claudia stood on the other side of the steps, designer sunglasses failing to hide her pale fury. Aaron lingered beside her jaw, clenched, the image of a man who knew his empire of lies was collapsing. For once, I didn't shrink. I didn't look away. The bruises on my shoulder had faded, but the fire inside me hadn't. They had said I'd die poor invisible nothing. But as the heavy courthouse doors opened before me, I realized this was bigger than money. This was justice. And I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the reckoning my grandfather had prepared me to be. Courtrooms have their own kind of silence. Heavy and electric, the kind that presses against your ribs until every breath feels like a declaration. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Denise steady beside me, while across the aisle my family, my own blood, sat as defendants. Claudia in a crisp white dress meant to signal innocence. Aaron in a suit too tight at the collar, my parents whispering frantically to their attorney. For once, they all looked small, stripped of the smug confidence they had worn like armor my entire life. Denise's opening argument was surgical. She laid out the paper trail, one document after another. Her voice calm but cutting. These are fraudulent transfers. These are forged signatures. These are offshore accounts used to evade taxes. And here she lifted the sheet music, the lullaby my grandfather had given me. This is the cipher that revealed the accounts. Evidence encoded by a man who trusted his granddaughter, Olivia Carter, to do what was right. Claudia shifted uncomfortably, her perfect facade cracking under the weight of proof. The judge's eyes bored into her as Denise played the audio recording of her screaming outside my apartment. The courtroom held its breath as Claudia's voice filled the space. "You're trash, Olivia. You'll always be trash." It was impossible to reconcile those words with the image of innocence she tried to project. Then Aaron's threats were played, his voice low and seething. "If you don't drop this, you won't make it out alive." Gasps rippled through the room. Aaron's attorney tried to object, but the damage was already done. His mask of control shattered his jaw, tightening as he realized every word he thought was intimidation had become a nail in his coffin. My parents fared no better. Receipts of stolen charity funds, their signatures scrawled across documents they couldn't deny, lay in stacks before the court. The very charity my mother had paraded as Claudia's achievement was revealed as a funnel for greed. Their attorney stammered, tried to spin stories of misunderstandings, but the evidence was too overwhelming. When the verdict came, it landed like a gavel against bone. Aaron was sentenced to 10 years for fraud, extortion, and assault. Claudia received 7 years for conspiracy and tax evasion. My parents avoided prison due to age and health, but their reputations were obliterated. Their assets seized, their names forever tied to scandal. I watched as officers cuffed Aaron and Claudia, their eyes wide with disbelief. Claudia screamed, "This isn't fair! That money is mine!" Her voice cracked, desperate, her composure gone. Aaron glared at me over his shoulder, venom dripping from his eyes. But for the first time, he had no words sharp enough to pierce me. As they were led away, the silence in the courtroom broke into murmurs. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras clicked, and I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap. My chest ached, not from fear, but from the strange, overwhelming weight of justice. Later, outside the courthouse, my mother tried to reach for me, her voice trembling. "Olivia, please. She's your sister. He was your husband. We're family." I stepped back, the autumn wind whipping my hair across my face. Family doesn't destroy each other. Family doesn't steal, threaten, or leave bruises. You taught me to believe I was nothing. Grandfather taught me the truth. And now the world knows it too. Her hand fell back to her side, her face collapsing into defeat. For the first time, I walked away from them without the familiar ache of guilt trailing me. Their downfall wasn't just their prison sentence or ruined reputations. It was the loss of the power they had wielded over me all my life. They had underestimated the girl they called worthless, the teacher they mocked for her meager paycheck. And in their downfall, I finally saw what my grandfather had left me. Not just wealth, not just evidence, but the strength to end the cycle of betrayal. They had tried to bury me. Instead, I had buried their lies. The weeks after the verdict felt like waking up from a long, suffocating nightmare. For the first time in years, I could walk into my apartment without flinching at shadows, without checking my phone for venomous texts from Aaron or Claudia. The silence was no longer heavy with fear, it was peaceful. The inheritance, once just numbers on a page, became something tangible. With Denise's guidance, I set aside a portion for my self-security I had never known, and the rest I used to build something my grandfather would have been proud of. I purchased an old brick building in the heart of the city and began renovating it into a community center and scholarship office. On the front wall, etched into a bronze plaque, were the words, "In honor of Thomas Carter." Truth and integrity are our legacy. Standing in that building on opening day, sunlight streaming through tall windows, children's laughter echoing down the halls, I felt the bruises of my past begin to fade. Parents came to thank me. Students clutched books I had provided, and for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was giving back, rewriting the story my family had twisted. Leah stood by my side, snapping photos for an article about the launch. "You know this is going to inspire people," she said, brushing a tear from her cheek. From forgotten teacher to the woman who took down her family's empire and built something better. I smiled, the weight in my chest finally lightening. This isn't about taking them down anymore. It's about lifting others up. But healing wasn't just in the grand gestures. It was in the small moments too. Drinking coffee in the morning without anxiety, twisting my stomach. Playing the old piano my grandfather left behind, letting the coded melody drift through my apartment as a song of peace rather than a warning. Watching my students thrive, knowing I could support them in ways my family never supported me. I also set boundaries firm and unshakable. My parents tried to reach out again, this time not with pleas for Claudia, but with thinly veiled apologies. Letters arrived dripping with phrases like "we didn't know," and "we just wanted the best for everyone." I read them, then shredded them. They had chosen Claudia and Aaron over me 1,000 times before. They had gaslit me until I believed their lies. I would not give them another chance to diminish me. Instead, I found family in those who had stood by me. Denise became more than just a lawyer. She became a mentor, a fierce protector who reminded me that strength wasn't loud. It was steady. Leah, my journalist friend, was my anchor, reminding me to laugh, to celebrate victories, to keep telling the truth. And the children I taught, wide-eyed and full of possibility, became daily proof that legacy isn't about blood. It's about the lives you touch. One evening, as I locked up the community center, I stood beneath the bronze plaque and whispered, "I did it, grandfather." The wind stirred gently, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice, steady and kind. "Olivia, you're the only one who listens." Healing, I realized, isn't about erasing scars. It's about carrying them with pride, proof of battles survived and truths defended. The scars on my shoulder from Aaron's shoved the invisible ones, from Claudia's cruelty, even the hollow ache of my parents' betrayal. They were part of me, but they no longer defined me. For years they had told me I would die. Poor, forgotten nothing. Instead, I was alive, wealthy not just in money, but in integrity, in community, in peace. They had tried to bury me under lies and betrayal. But like my grandfather's journals, I had held the truth close until the time was right, and now I was free. As the dust settled and the noise of courtrooms and news headlines faded, I found myself reflecting on everything that had unfolded. The phrase "you'll die poor" no longer carried the sting it once did. Instead, it felt almost laughable, a relic of a time when I let other people define my worth. Wealth, I had learned, was never about the numbers. In an account, it was about integrity, about the courage to stand when everyone else tried to make you kneel. I thought often of my grandfather's journals. They weren't just records of financial misdeeds or evidence for the case. They were reminders of who he was and what he had seen in me all along. In the margins of one page, he had written, "Truth outlives us all." At the time, I hadn't understood. Now I did. My parents' lies, Claudia's greed, Aaron's threats, they had all been temporary weapons. But truth, documented and undeniable, had endured, and it had set me free. Legacy, I realized, is never about who shines the brightest in family photographs or who earns the loudest applause. Legacy is about the quiet choices that ripple outward. My grandfather's choice to trust me, the lesser granddaughter, had changed the course of everything. His belief in me became my armor, my weapon, my guide. And now, through the scholarship fund and the community center, I was passing that legacy on. Children who had been told they were invisible, unworthy, or too poor to matter would walk through those doors and hear a different story. You are capable. You are valuable. You are more than what others say about you. There were still nights when echoes of Claudia's venom or Aaron's threats haunted me, but they no longer controlled me. They were shadows against the light of what I had built. And with every success story that emerged from the community center, with every child who opened a book purchased by the fund, I felt my scars transform into symbols of survival. I understood now why my grandfather had chosen me. Not Claudia, not my parents. They craved power without responsibility, wealth without honor. I carried something they could never possess, the willingness to seek truth, to protect it, even when it cost me everything. So when people asked me if I felt vindicated seeing my family fall, I always answered honestly. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about truth being seen. Their downfall was never the victory. The real victory was the life I had built. From the ashes of their cruelty, a life rooted in honesty, healing, and strength. The message I carried forward, the one I repeated to myself whenever doubt whispered, was simple. Wealth is not measured in dollars. It is measured in integrity, in courage, in the truths we refuse to bury. My family's empire of lies had collapsed, but from its ruins, I had built something far more enduring. And every time I walked past that bronze plaque with my grandfather's name etched into it, I remembered that the truest inheritance is not money. It is the courage to fight for justice no matter the cost. The evening sun bled gold across the windows of the community center as I locked the doors. The sound of children's laughter still echoing faintly from the day. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk looking up at the bronze plaque with my grandfather's name. My reflection stared back at me in the polished surface, no longer the timid, forgotten daughter who once ate peanut butter sandwiches in silence while her family feasted elsewhere, but a woman who had carried the truth through fire and come out stronger. I thought about the journey, about Aaron's vicious text, Claudia's venomous calls, my parents' gaslighting whispers. I thought about the fear, the bruises, the shame. And then I thought about the courtroom, about the moment their empire of lies crumbled under the weight of evidence that never blinked. Justice had not only silenced their cruelty, it had freed me. Now as the city hummed around me, I realized something profound. Their words no longer defined me. Their betrayal no longer caged me. My worth had never been theirs to decide. I whispered softly into the evening air, almost as if my grandfather could still hear me. This is the real VIP life, and it was. Not the false luxury of Claudia's stolen wealth. Not the empty arrogance of Aaron's threats, but the quiet, unshakable dignity of knowing. I had chosen truth, chosen justice, chosen myself. So I ask you listening to my story, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you ever carried the weight of being told you were nothing, only to discover your true strength when it mattered most? If my story spoke to you, let me know in the comments below. Share your own story of betrayal, of resilience, of finding justice when no one believed in you. And if you believe that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to light, Then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join me for more stories where justice finally wins. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance we can ever claim is not money, but the courage to stand when others try to break us.